Okay, today we're going to be learning about point slope form. And it's a good thing to understand that, although we've done a lot of work in slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b, there are other ways of writing equations for lines. So linear equations can be written several different ways. There are three major forms, and this is the second one we're going to learn. So we already have slope intercept form under our belts. Now we're going to learn how to write equations in point slope form. And some of you guys may have seen this before in middle school, and if it's brand new to you, that's okay. The more you work with it, the more comfortable you'll become. It's actually pretty easy. So it says the point slope form of the equation that goes through a point x1, comma y1, or x sub 1, comma y sub 1, with a slope of m is, and this is point slope form. So this is going to look a little bit different than slope intercept form. You can see it's y minus y sub 1 equals the slope times the quantity x minus x sub 1. And when you first start working with this, really it's just going to be testing your ability to plug in the slope for m and to plug in your point appropriately. So point slope can be used when given the slope and a point, or it can be used when given 2 points. So those are your two major situations that you're going to look for that it's a good time to use point slope form. Just solve for the slope and pick one of the 2 points to substitute back into the equation. So like I said, if you know your slope, you're going to be plugging it in right here for m, okay, nothing new there. And then as long as you know a point, and you'll almost always be given a point, you'll plug in the x-coordinate right here, and you'll plug in the y-coordinate right there. And at the very end, if there's any kind of simplifying that needs to be done, that's what you'll be working on. Okay, let's do an example. All right, it says write the equation of the line that passes through 3, 4 and has a slope of 6 using point slope form. All right, you can see we'll have a second example right after this, but let's look at the first one. So we know that our point is 3, 4. And to begin, I might just start by labeling this. Let's see, my 3 is my x-coordinate, so that's like x sub 1. And my 4 is my y-coordinate, so that's like y sub 1. Okay? And then my slope is positive 6, so that's my m. And your job is basically to remember what point slope form looks like. So you're going to have to memorize this if you don't know it already. So remember that point slope form is going to be y minus y sub 1 equals the slope times the quantity x minus x sub 1. And then from here, we're just going to plug in our information. Okay, so what is our y sub 1? Well, it's 4. So we're going to take that 4 and we're going to plug it in right here for y sub 1. Okay, pretty easy stuff. So you're going to write this as y minus 4. See how that 4 just fits right in there nicely. Okay, y minus 4 equals the slope, which is 6, times the quantity x minus, and then what do you think we're going to write in right here? Well, x sub 1 is 3. And that's it. That is point slope form. Now, once you get comfortable with this, if you're looking at this, you would know that, hey, I have a point at 3, 4, because I see a 3 in this spot and a 4 in this spot. You could plot that point, and then, hey, my slope is 6, so I can go up 6 over 1 from there, and you can graph the whole line just by being comfortable with this format. But this is your final equation, and notice how it relates x and y. Okay, just like y equals mx plus b, we always have a general y and a general x. We still have a general y right here and a general x right there. Okay, so that part stays the same. All right, down at the bottom it says write the equation of the line that passes through -8, -2, and 4, 1 using point slope form. Notice this time around, they don't give us the information in the same form. They give us 2 points, but they don't tell us directly exactly what the slope is. Is that going to be a problem? Well, probably not, because you know how to find the slope from 2 points. What would you do? Well, you would use the slope formula. So if you want to go ahead and do this along with me, you go ahead and write down that slope formula. The slope is the change in y over the change in x. And it might help to go back and label these. That way we won't be confused. So I've got my x sub 1 and my y sub 1. I've got my x sub 2 and my y sub 2. Notice we're still going to be able to put this in point slope form. We're just going to have to do a little work up front to figure out what that slope is. So for me, it looks like I have negative 2 minus 1 over negative 8 minus 4, because I'm a y1er. Okay, you probably know that about me by now. Let's see here. Negative 2 minus 1 is going to be negative 3, and negative 8 minus 4 is going to be negative 12. And that is going to simplify to positive 3 over 12, which is positive 1/4. So just kind of know that you know that the slope right now is 1/4. Okay? So that's going to be the value that you are plugging in for m. Let's go ahead and rewrite that point slope form. The more you write it, the more likely you are to have it memorized. So we know that it's y minus y sub 1 equals m times the quantity x minus x sub 1. We know that the slope is 1/4, so I can go ahead and plug that in for my m value. Now there is something to think about here. Okay, which point are you going to choose? You can do negative 8 comma negative 2, or are you going to choose 4 comma 1? And it's important for you to know that it does not matter which point you choose. Half of you guys will choose the first point, half of you guys will choose the second point, and both equations are correct. Both equations are equivalent. They actually mean the same thing. So we're going to write two different answers here, but you only need to have one if you were doing this for a quiz or a test. Which one of these points do you think would be the easier point to fill in? Probably thinking 4 comma 1, because those are just basic positive numbers. Okay, so if I were to plug in 4 comma 1, it would be y minus y sub 1, or in this case, this guy right here, so y minus 1, equals 1/4 times x minus 4. That is one possible answer, and that would work. I want you to notice, though, if we were to use the other form. And this one I'll do in a different color. Let me pick green. Okay, if we were to choose the other point, negative 8 comma negative 2, okay, watch what happens when you plug this one in. You'll get y minus, and then y sub 1 is negative 2. We'll come back and deal with that a little bit later. You get y minus negative 2 equals the slope, which is still 1/4, times the quantity x minus negative 8. So you've got some minus and negatives in there. Well, what do you think you do in that situation? You're just going to have to simplify. So before you write your final answer, we all know that y minus negative 2 is y plus 2. So you're just going to write it as y plus 2 equals 1/4 times, and then what do you think I'm going to write inside the parentheses? X minus negative 8 becomes x plus 8. And this equation would suffice as well. Okay, so that's sort of my brief presentation there. Now I'm going to let you practice some on your own. Let's take a look at an example that hopefully you can do by yourself now, and feel free to go back and re-watch if you need to, but I definitely want you to get an answer for this on your own before we go over it together. So it says, write the equation for the line that has a slope of 2 and which passes through the point negative 5 comma 7. I would highly recommend writing down point slope form first and then just filling in kind of like I showed you before. Okay, go ahead and try this one on your own, and then unpause when you're ready to resume the video and go over answers. Okay, let's take a look and see how you did. Write the equation for the line that has a slope of 2 and which passes through the point negative 5 comma 7. So like I said, I always write down my my point slope form first. Y minus y sub 1 equals the slope times the quantity x minus x sub 1. And just remember, x sub 1 and y sub 1, all that indicates is that's where you're going to be plugging in your coordinates. All right. So I know that it has a slope of 2. I can go ahead and put that for the m. I know that the x coordinate is -5 and the y coordinate is 7. So I'll go y minus y sub 1, which is 7. So y minus 7 equals 2 times the quantity x minus x sub 1. Well, that's going to be x minus, and then x sub 1 is -5. So I will need to simplify some stuff here before I finalize this. Final equation, y minus 7 equals the slope 2 times x plus 5. This minus a negative is going to simplify to a plus. Pretty easy. Don't feel the temptation to keep moving with this. Oftentimes, if you're learning this for the first time, you're going to look at this and you're going to say, oh, well, what do I do next? Maybe I'm supposed to distribute this 2 and then add 7 to both sides. I understand that impulse, but that's not point slope form. This is point slope form right here, nothing else for you to do. Okay, let's try another example. Good job on that one. This one says, write the equation for the line that has a slope of -4 in which passes through the point 1, -3. So go ahead and try this one on your own and then unpause when you're ready to resume the video. So same as last time, I'm always going to begin by copying down point slope form. Y minus y sub 1 equals m times quantity x minus x sub 1. One of the reasons it helps to copy this every single time is that by the time you take your final exam or you move on to Algebra 2 eventually, you want to have this memorized. And the more you work with it, the more that you will just kind of intrinsically understand it. So here I have my x sub 1 and here I have my y sub 1. And obviously, it tells you my slope is -4, so that's my m value. And I'm just going to kind of plug these in. So y minus, and my y sub 1 is -3, equals the slope, which is -4, times the quantity x minus 1. And then what needs to be simplified there? Well, that y minus -3, that's going to need to be simplified to y plus 3. So y plus 3 equals -4 times the quantity x minus 1. Now, the more you work with point slope form, eventually you're going to be given an equation that looks like this and maybe asked to graph it. And once you're comfortable with this format, you're going to realize, okay, this guy is my x value and this guy is my y value, but maybe not exactly. Because of the way the formula is set up, since it's supposed to be x minus x sub 1, that means x sub 1 has to be a positive 1. And since the format is set up y minus y sub 1, well, that means that my y value actually has to be a -3. And you'll be able to infer the point by looking at the equation. You would go to this point on a coordinate plane, let's say 1, -3, maybe it's down here, and then you would use a slope of -4, you know, down 4 over 1, down 4 over 1 to maybe get your next points, and eventually you'd be able to graph a line. I kind of did a horrible job of that, but you can see that's the thinking. Once you can locate a point and know the slope, you can get a whole entire graph from that. Okay, I think we have one final example for you to try. It says, using point slope form, write the equation for the line that passes through 8, 3 and -2, -5. Notice you've only been given 2 points here. So do what you can with those 2 points to come up with all the information you need to write your equation in point slope form. All right, go ahead and hit pause and do this on your own, and then unpause when you're ready to go over answers. Okay, I have my point slope form written down there, and notice they don't tell me what the slope is, so that's going to be a little side work for me. I'm going to have to go and figure out what the slope is on my own. So go do a little side work here. I'm going to definitely use that slope formula. Slope equals y sub 1 minus y sub 2 over x sub 1 minus x sub 2. And let's make sure we plug everything in correctly. Looks like my y sub 1 is 3, and my y sub 2 is negative 5. Looks like my x sub 1 is 8, and my x sub 2 is negative 2. Okay. So when I simplify this, 3 minus negative 5 is going to be 3 plus 5, which is 8. And then 8 minus negative 2 is going to be 8 plus 2, which is 10. And then you definitely want to simplify that as well. So 8/10 is reduced to 4/5. Notice that's going to be my slope. Okay, so let's take my slope, plug it back in. And this guy is going to have 2 answers. And you can see that because we have 2 points given. So some of you are going to choose the first point, and some of you guys are going to choose the second point. And I'll provide both answers here. If you chose the first point, okay, that y value is 3, so it's going to be y minus 3, equals, the slope is 4/5, which we just determined, and then times the quantity x minus x sub 1, and your x sub 1 value is 8. So that would be your point slope form if you plugged in the first point, and that's definitely a valid equation. Let's do it with the other point. Now, I'd like you to practice the other point just because it deals with negatives, and you want to be comfortable with what happens when you plug in the negative numbers. There's always a simplification that needs to occur. So we've got y minus, in this case, y sub 1 is negative 5. So y minus negative 5 equals the slope, which is still 4/5, times the quantity, and we're going to have x minus x sub 1, in this case, x minus negative 2, because negative 2 is x sub 1. Okay, and you're just going to have to simplify there. So when we simplify, pretty easy stuff. This becomes y plus 5 equals 4/5 times x plus 2. And there you have it. You can have either of these answers, although if it were me and I'm doing this for the first time, I would definitely practice coming up with both answers. That way you're comfortable with it. Okay, so that's point slope form. Feel free to rewatch the video. Basically, it's just plugging in numbers and setting up your equation in a different format. It's going to feel different than slope-intercept form for now, but by the time you guys get to pre-calculus and calculus, this idea of finding the slope of a line at a certain point, even if you're working off a curve or something, point slope form might actually become more useful to you than slope-intercept form currently feels. So it's definitely an important one to know. All right, good job with this, and we'll see you in class soon.